Welcome to the Happy Sensory Corner in Special Education podcast, where we ask leaders in special ed to share their insights and experiences to better understand how to support students in special ed. And the focus at the moment with this episodes is how to prime the children for transitions. Before we start our interview, I'd like to introduce our guests. And our first guest is Petal Harrigain. She's a special education teacher at Sheldon A. Bruckner School in Brooklyn, New York. Did I say that right, Petal?
Okay.
It's going to be interesting to learn from someone who's in the trenches, but I think you're also in some committees for the development of curriculums for children with special ed. Is that right?
Correct, yes.
Cool. And we're also here with Claudie Pomares, the creator of sensory enrichment therapy. She is the chief science officer at Mendability. Mendability, we provide a unique evidence-based brain stimulation program to improve the behavior regulation, learning abilities of all students, but especially those who struggle the most. And Claudie will be doing a short training on a sensory enrichment protocol at the end or in the middle of this interview, so stick around. Um, and I'm your host, Kim Pomares, CEO at Mendability. And for those of you who are paying attention, yes, and I think I've said this now in a bunch of episodes. So those of you who are new to us, then you should know, because I like to say it, that Claudie is my mom. And a while
Oh,
back, Claudie needed to help to manage her private clinic as it was growing, and said, "Sure, Mom, let me help you for a little bit." And that was 25 years ago.
Would
So,
not let you
Petal.
go.
yes, that's a great story.
So uh, my why, and I think Claudie's why, our why is to help everyone, especially when they feel vulnerable, to feel at peace, to feel comfortable in the world around them, so that they can be their true selves. What is your why?
My why is to have all my students and feel complete and to feel purposeful and to be fearless in their aspirations. Every day when I get to school, I try to let the students see a reflection of themselves in me and how I interact with them and how I engage with them. So that's my why for getting up every morning and going in there.
That sounds like a great why. How did you get into special ed?
So I was always poised to be an educator. From the time I was 15 years old, I was tutoring students on my block after school, younger children in Trinidad. And I was always fascinated with how students of the same age who were chronologically peers were so different in their skills and abilities. And that was always like in the back of my mind. And then I stumbled upon a reading on Howard Gardner and multiple intelligences, and I was just hooked. I was consumed with the idea that we're all smart, we're all intelligent, but we demonstrate that expertise in different ways. And so that is the lens through which I view neurodivergent students or students with different abilities, that it's my job to find that light in you and to make sure you get to shine it as often as you can.
That sounds so lovely. That
Mm.
reminds me of anyway, we'll get into it later. Uh, so tell us how. I'd like to go to dive straight into the subject at hand, helping children with transitions. What can you tell our listeners a little bit about some of the techniques that you use to help children with transitioning between sessions, between classrooms, between, after recess? How do you help them?
So the first thing I start with is an understanding that change is difficult. And sometimes we overlook that because we don't view tiny little changes in the classroom as something significant. But for young children, that can be very anxiety provoking. So the understanding is, I want you to feel in control. I want you to be able to understand everything that's happening around you. I'm anticipating that You want to be in control. Some of what is not visible, I want you to be able to predict it. So the first thing is that everything that's happening in the day must easily be identifiable. So we have visual schedules in the classroom, we have timers, we make sure that those schedules have icons and pictures. We want it to be easily understandable for the students, and it really reduces anxiety and it helps them to mentally prepare for what's coming ahead. So that's with their schedules. And then when they cannot predict, we want to have a consistent routine. So there might be a day where the schedule isn't updated or a teacher isn't there, and something that's not anticipated, but we try to adhere to a routine so the children can feel completely in control, understanding what's happening in their day. And then when those changes come about, we present opportunities, almost creating like the illusion of choice. Like, do you want to go to dance, or would you like to go spend 30 minutes in the gym? And giving them an opportunity to choose options, and either of those are favorable. So they really feel, wow, this is my world. Okay, I had to make an in the moment decision, but it's okay. I'm in control. So the anxiety kind of is dissipating. And whenever change is happening, we make sure we provide as much advance notice, almost like a pre-transition heads up. And I like to connect the activity at hand to what's coming, even if it's something that seems completely different. Let's make a connection so that it kind of, kind of softens the idea that we're going to change, So all of those things are happening seamlessly, continually throughout the day.
You're making it sound so easy and well rehearsed, like you've been doing this for years. I mean, is this a process? All of this makes sense, if it works for special ed, it works for gen ed. So
Right.
I have some questions I want to go into, how we could get gen ed to implement some of this as well. But how long did it take you to get to this level of comfort? And are you the only one comfortable? How do you get your team to be comfortable with all of this? What's their level of buy-in? How do you get them trained? What's the level of variability in implementation? You must have teachers who are really good at this and teachers who are not really good at this. Let's start with maybe how did you develop this approach for helping children transition?
So I think I started really from the perspective of empathy and understanding the days that the transition did not go well. That was a learning moment for me. Anytime there's anything in my space that's not going as planned, I try to ask myself, I wonder if I did everything well as this student's teacher to avoid this. So once I know that an unsuccessful transition or a student who is dysregulating is homework from me, then I start to think about how I can support them. So I think I just remained in a space of learning for a long time, and I was very committed to it. And then I did kind of get thrown into the fire because my first day of teaching, I had some students who really required me to put all of my teaching expertise into work consistently for my first 10 months. I was an ICT second grade teacher. So it was their emotional development, their natural maturity, being 7 and 8 years old, combined with, other needs that they had. And so that was really, like a training by fire. And I think I came out of that on the other side, kind of feeling more prepared. And when I interacted with my peers, one of the challenges is that some of the presentations of neurodivergent students appear like discipline issues, even to seasoned educators. The behaviors present as maybe laziness or as defiance, or as disruptive. But it's really a student trying to understand their own emotional control. So having to discuss that with a peer or having a conversation with a teacher who is not a special education expert was kind of training for myself, that second level of training where when you're coaching someone, you're really rehearing it all the time. So I did a lot of that, and it kind of prepared me for where I am. I do have teachers say, oh my goodness, like I'm looking to you, like you have the patience of a saint, your grace, your poise, your de-escalation skills and your ability to remain in a steady pace, even though there's so much chaos happening around you. That did not come easy. I trained myself to really demonstrate that level of self-control because I'm the adult in the situation and I have a child who I need to teach emotional regulation. So it's kind of a lot of learning. Teaching is one of those lifelong learning in the moment, thinking on the spot, and really developing all of these expertise just in real time. It's not easy.
I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah. Mhm.
Do you have what's the what's a really nice story that you can share? Obviously, not naming any names, right?
Mhm.
But is there a story recently of something that would illustrate the point of uh, the necessity to prepare children ahead of time and to give them this sense of control? And I love the tip that you shared. Give them this illusion of choice by giving them two options that they're really two options that would go either way for you.
Yeah.
But then it distracts them from the other options of not complying and not being happy.
Mhm.
We train, and maybe Claudia, I'll give you the opportunity to describe this. But when we train our parents, we give them the same tip. So do you have a story?
I do have one for our senior trip. So it's a sad story. It was really me having to be able to break some bad news to our students. So a bus was chartered for 53 students. And we had a meeting on Friday about the list and students that paid and getting T-shirts together. And somehow it was lost on the coordinator to remind us that this year it's a first come, first serve system. So we had more students paid for the trip than there was seats on the bus. And we were given that information on the day of the trip. Students are in the auditorium, everyone's in their field trip t-shirt, and the kids are prepped and they're discussing what has to happen. And so they chose me to break the news to the students. So I went over, I called the four students over, it was just four kids. And I said, I am going to share some news with you that's really going to require your resilience. The news isn't great, but I know that you guys can make it through this. We accepted your payments, but unknown to us, there was a due date, and I explained it. And their eyes glassed up. And I say that I know you're being required to be very strong in this situation. And I'm presently very impressed by the way you are handling it. I know they wanted to kind of like question and cry, but every inkling of maturity I saw, I immediately recognized it, celebrated it. And I said, listen, some adults would not have been able to handle the news the way you guys are doing it. So they were just motivated and one of them eked out, I understand, and this is a child who has an IEP and has, emotional regulation issues. I had goosebumps looking at him because he was not the child I was expecting to say that. And I said, I know that you're going to be hearing a lot about the trip later, and you have to be in the classroom and think of it. I mean, a lot of things are promised to them to make up for it. But just hearing that in the moment, going from a high to a low for a child, I was very impressed by them, and I celebrated it. And when we came back from the trip, or maybe the following day, one of them came and said, Miss H, I was able to do my work. I didn't throw a tantrum. Like, he was so proud to be able to report. He recognized his own growth in that situation. So I think I was a little more anxious about telling them the news than the kids actually were to hear it. So yeah, that was a toughie, but they took it really well.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Handling transitions is such a it's everywhere in our life. We're always transitioning from one thing to the other.
Mhm.
And even us, and I'm saying neurotypicals with air quotes, we know that if we're interrupted in the middle of work, it takes a good 20 minutes for our brain to get back into this zone of focus. We can become productive and efficient again in what we're doing. And so we have to be very careful how we manage transitions and allow people to interrupt and things like that. And so I think what you're saying, and I can see how what you're saying would apply to everything. Let's switch gears a little bit. Where do you see the biggest need in your school district when it comes to special education?
I think the biggest need would be really to provide the students their area.
Petal, I think the microphone fell off your lapel or something. You
Oh,
sound a bit distant.
I was holding it, so I'll pin it back on. I thought I was
Oh, okay, okay. And it's okay, you know. My microphone is right here.
okay.
I think Claudie's microphone is more discreet, but we're all using
Oh,
microphones.
yes, is it better now? The audio?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
awesome. Yes, I think it's really allowing students to explore all the modalities of learning. Sometimes the message seems duplicitous. They require teachers to differentiate. They require an immense amount of scaffolding and supports in the classroom. And then when products of learning and evidence of learning is really required, then they remove those scaffolds, or they require the student to demonstrate learning in a way that is not really aligned with their skill set. So I think they're not really, sometimes I feel there's still an opening for the district to accept that if I speak my response to an essay question, and that is organized and structured, that is just as effective, and I'm just as adept in learning as someone who can write, a 6-page essay. That's what they say, but I'm not sure that in terms of standardized testing, we always default back to the cookie cutter approach. And, as much as we say we're giving them, as much room to be their best selves and to, explore learning through different modalities, it kind of comes back to, I'm going to put you in the box. I want you to perform really well in here, even though it's uncomfortable and even though it's different. And so I think that would be the greatest opportunity to allow learning to be multifaceted in the true sense of the word, all the time, and not just at specific moments and throughout the day.
So if I may intervene here, how do you see that improve? How can that move on to be better?
I think assessment criteria, I think how learning is assessed and evaluated and measured in the classroom has to change. And I think that there's a lot of conversation about ranking and student position and evidence of learning. And I think how that is measured probably needs to be revisited, because it really does, it doesn't seem as diverse and really structured in a way to support learners with such diverse learning styles and learning paces and learning levels. And way in the future, I think that, in elementary and middle schools, I think we have to be more open to students being educated with students who are not their same age peers. I think from the minute that you make learning about chronological age, then you're almost, like not acknowledging that children have different learning skills, different emotional levels. Maybe they need to transition with a different class today just to see how they do it. And that's okay if it's a younger group of children, because maybe that's where that student is at, and they can feel, the comfort level being around their emotionally age peers, with the emotional maturity that they have, and not necessarily their same age peers. So
that is fascinating that, in fact, there is so much work to be done. It seems that nowadays, with so much opportunity for training, it should be moving on. So do you see different types of training for educators then? What should happen so that they can, because they don't have time, they may not be motivated. How can we bring, as a group, who feel for the children who are different in many ways, how can we reach out and how can we bring in the training or the information?
I think firstly, the idea of special education professional development and trainings being targeted to only special education teachers might be an opportunity in itself, because there's a lot of onboarding and a lot of conversation. Yes, we work as a team. I'm in an ICT class, integrated co-teaching, and my partner is a general education teacher. But when we are given professional development pertaining towards accommodations and modifications, it's being centered to special education teachers. So we continue to become more informed and more versed on best practices. And I think the general education teachers, I wouldn't say that they're unaware, but I think there's an opportunity there for them also to be more aware of presentations in the classroom, how to differentiate between a student who is giving you a warning sign and actually in crisis, and certain trainings and information, I think would really kind of level the playing field with special and general education teachers. I think that that's an opportunity in my observation.
So sharing, in fact, the education that is provided to you because you are in a specific group, expanding it to the other teachers.
Correct. In a practical, actionable way, because we get a lot of theory, and we get a lot of information. And then I think it really has to be applied to what specific actions are you going to take in the classroom? How is this going to affect curriculum and learning? What does this look like as you interact with your students? I think that's the next step, because we have amazing professional development sessions and beautiful slides and lots of information. And then, maybe the follow-up with how this is actually being implemented in the classroom maybe isn't there. I know everybody's plate is full, administrators and teachers, and so much of our day is embedded in teaching that really partnering and that co-planning time kind of takes a back seat. So I think we need more of that.
Yeah, that's exactly why we provide training services for special ed. And what you're talking about resonates really strongly. We had to learn the hard way that this initial training session, even if we made the material available as a resource later on, was not enough. Very quickly, we realized we needed to have, we thought it was going to be an expensive bonus and add-on, and directors would not be able to afford the extra coaching, the onboarding, the hand-holding for 3 months to install the learning and make it part of the day-to-day activities, especially with those who need a little bit extra help, maybe because they're busy and that they're dealing with what's in their face, and there's this really cool stuff that they just learned, but they just don't have the bandwidth to integrate. But forcing this extra time to sit and consider and bridge the theory to the practice is something that is now, we know we don't offer the option of doing just a online training course. This online training course, and then 3 months of onboarding, and then we pick a champion in there. It'd probably be somebody like you because you're just so awesome, and then you would interact with us directly for 6 weeks, for this on a weekly basis, to figure out, okay, which teacher needs extra help this week, which classroom needs extra help this week, what resources can we put together from the training material to remind them, and usually we find it. So yeah, you're right. And so speaking to that, have you had success with, what's the best training program you've experienced? What's the best thing that you've brought into the class that came from a vendor, or that came from something that you found, or that came from the government? Tell us the story of that experience.
I think one of the more impactful training sessions we had was differentiating between accommodations and modifications. And I think that it's in the classroom for general education teachers, and I don't mean to, just put them out there, but the idea of whole group instruction is safer, it's more efficient, it's more desirable. And so when a student is identified as having a specific need, I think it's automatically, the thought sometimes is, wow, if this student benefits from this, maybe I can apply this to the whole classroom. So then, now it's an accommodation everyone is getting. It's not specific to that child. So you've really removed the possibility for equity, And so I think when we went through that training, they really talked about what it looks like to modify curriculum to meet the needs of a child, their emotional needs, their anxiety with transitions, why it might be necessary to give a specific child a mini schedule on their desk. Everyone does not get one, but why this child might need that in order to really anticipate his day and feel in control, as opposed to, whole group instruction. So that was very practical. It was insightful. It was really comparing, what is like what's in practice and what really has to be put in place. Because one thing that remains a challenge is that teachers, and I'm probably doing the same thing, get very comfortable when something works, because ignoring that the idea of teaching and pedagogy is always like in some kind of a metamorphosis, ignoring that is safe, because if I change it, I have to create something to fill that gap. So teachers hold on to these practices that they've used in the past, and they're less open to things that's new and different because it's just safer. And, I knew it worked in 1998 when I first became a teacher. This is what I did, and it was so effective. And I've seen the apprehension when, even for reciprocal teaching, for example, when we try to make teachers facilitators as opposed to leaders, and we were in the professional development, letting them know that a lot of the questions that students ask in the classroom can be answered by their peers. So we want to provide as much opportunity for that first before you intervene. You're a guide, you're only stepping in when necessary. And there was just like, oh my God, how can I do this? The idea of not knowing my place anymore if this lesson is not teacher-led, So a lot of the professional development really has to address what you're doing. That is great and wonderful, but here's an adjustment that's going to work, and here's why. Because if you don't tell them the why, then they just say, oh, another professional development. They have to understand, here's why this change is good and necessary and beneficial, And I think that those angles are what we have to address with educators. That's what I had to address with reciprocal teaching, to let them know that I'm telling you, we're putting those kids in a group. They're going to explore this text together. They're going to ask each other questions. They're going to make predictions. They're going to stumble upon a word they don't know. They will clarify it on their own. And we're not jumping in and giving them the vocabulary, but letting that productive struggle happen. It's going to sound chaotic at first, but we're going to let them, and then we are going to be the facilitators. A total change from teacher-led instruction. So a lot of purpose has to be put into it with information. Yeah.
Claudie, having heard all of this, what are the ideas that you have for training? I have one, but I don't know if that's where you were going with this, but it feels like typically during a conversation, during an interview, Petal, we uncover some challenges and difficulties and struggles, and then we jump into the rescue and we say, oh, just do this and that, and it will make a tremendous impact on your ability or in reducing that particular challenge. But in your case, I think what I think we should do is give a protocol that is designed to increase processing speed, maybe, so that they can learn faster. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, definitely. And I so love the respect that you give to the students, the autonomy, the control. You speak about it in a way that's positive. Like the kids are not controlling, they are giving. And that's quite amazing. What was your idea, Kim, about the speed of processing?
Well, there's a few different speed of processing is not really what I had in mind. Is when Petal talks about this reciprocal teaching, giving the tools for the students to be able to teach one another better. So there's like social skills, there's reading skills, there's sensory processing skills. There's lots of stuff at play, and I'm wondering if there's like a tool or two that maybe we should ask you, Petal. What function, what aspect of this reciprocal teaching is the most challenging in your classrooms, in your special ed classrooms?
Um, I think the most challenging part was the teachers trusting the students. I think that they did not believe they were able to do it. And they said, the students in my class don't get along. They won't agree. They won't accept a leadership from a peer, even though we have peer mentoring activities in the classroom. So the teachers actually understanding that the skills required to make this successful are already in their students. That was one. And then again, it was the idea that we already have guided reading, and it's a proven practice, and it supports reading, it builds comprehension. Why change it? Not understanding that empowering students to take ownership of their learning, build their leadership skills, lean on each other, work collaboratively. All of those were not being explored as heavily as it should be in guided reading. So it really was, again, teacher buy-in, understanding that the students do possess the skill set, embracing change and saying that there are other things that look different that work just as effectively. And here's why, and here is how. And we looked for, peer-reviewed articles, and we looked up the research, and we use the data, which is a language a lot of teachers understand. How is this going to affect outcomes in the classroom? And we put all that together, but it took some buy-in in the beginning. Absolutely.
Yeah, my turn. Too bad.
Okay.
You should not have breathed at that moment. Because I can imagine one activity, one exercise that we have and used with in classrooms, and we are focusing on brain development. That's really what Mendability does, giving tools to the teachers so that the brains are more able to gather, keep the information, store it, restore it. And one of the tools for that is improving serotonin production and release in the brain, because this is the key of learning. And one very simple way for the improvement of release of serotonin in the brain is soft touch. And there is an activity that children play sometimes at home, or board games that they may do. But we have one where we have two kids together, and they are going to be reciprocal. The one is going to give, the other is going to receive and act, and then they reverse the roles. So in that particular exercise, we have the one kid draw a letter on the back of the student. And we always request only to draw a capital letter and to do it extremely slowly. That request, something that you have mentioned at the very beginning, when you spoke about seeing in your mind, having a preview of the next coming event, right? We call it in our field mental image. So in order for you to recognize what's being felt on your back, first you have to be focusing, and your serotonin is in charge of processing this tactile information. Now it becomes an image in your brain. So you see that letter. You do not say that letter because it would become an auditory information, but you go into a bag and you are going to retrieve the letter that you felt. This is a very complex brain function activity. It goes from sense of touch, receiving information sent to the fine motor activity. The fingers have to feel what has been seen in the brain. And so there are only 3 or 4 letters in the bag, and of course the one that has been drawn. So it's sort of organized ahead of time. So as soon as the kid retrieves the letter he felt, the one who drew praises him as wonderful, you did a great job. And in fact, we encourage praising even if it's not the right letter, because it's really important to have the reward system, release of dopamine, I feel good about myself because I succeeded. So the result doesn't matter much. And so they turn around, and the one who just got the message and went into the bag now is drawing the letter on his friend's back. And something happens. You spoke about the resistance of some teachers. The kids don't get along.
Right.
Well, we know that neuroscience, being our field, the studies say that when you give a soft touch information and you help serotonin release, you have also a sort of development of empathy that you don't specifically know who you feel good about, but oh yeah, that's Bob. We just did that. And so this lovely interaction that is soft, gentle, but is about letters. So it is still academic, is creating between the children a bond that they made each other succeed to something and they gave each other something really sweet. So the teachers could have several bags, put the kids 2 by 2, and as in their pair exercise. And here we have for all
Yeah,
the
I thought I
exercise.
would share the screen and actually while you're talking, talk about
Yeah,
the so they can
brilliant.
see it.
Yeah, but all the exercises that we have and we provide in trainings or to schools, we have videos for them. And so in that video, it's exactly what I was explaining. The amount of focus you have to give to feel is also everything else is sort of dimmed down. You really have to be in that moment. If it is enjoyable, kids can take a second turn or they can change team. Okay, so and so, you did it with so and so, go and do it there, and you go do it there. So eventually, all the children have had an interaction, and they sometimes ask for that activity to the teachers. It's a very quiet moment in the classroom. I would probably recommend to have some instrumental music playing because it will not only improve the release of serotonin and dopamine, as we know for orchestral music, but it also covers random sounds, a clicking maybe in the letters in the back and so forth. So if you associate all of that, soft touch, listening to music, fine motor focused, I think you get a very, what you said, practical activity that has a long-term effect. And if it was to be done every day in the morning or right after lunch, having that moment of peaceful gentleness, that could be very useful. If you felt that is a nice plan, you could share it. It's so easy, right?
Yes.
So simple, but on a neurological aspect of thing dimension, it has a forever long-term effect.
And that's really beautiful. I love that you mentioned after lunch because we had an SEL initiative. We had 15 minutes after lunch to really have the kids focus on their emotional development and to really calm themselves and to, visualize pictures in their minds if they listen to someone reading. And it's working. After lunch, the kids are very riled because they're excited coming in from outside. So we try to start from the stairwells. So as we make it up to the stairs, we're already prepping them. And this activity would be an amazing activity to do after lunch. I love it. And I'm definitely going to look into it
We have a free training that we do for schools,
oh,
and
wow.
the people it's half an hour, and the people can pick between our de-escalation technique, which uses a sensory method to soothe and settle the brain, so you don't, and then you can start talking to the kids, right? Which just brings it right back up. It's truly miraculous how effective it is. You'd be amazed, and it's I think our most popular request. But I think in your case, the second most popular request is our transitioning protocol. And we use it either at the beginning of the class day to set the tone and help the kids have a great day. But often we find teachers repeating it at lunchtime, after lunchtime, when there's this digestive system is kicking in and they're not quite as resilient as they were at the beginning of the day. And this boosts serotonin and dopamine, all those happy brain juices,
Yes.
and refills them so that they can have more to be more resilient with, but also more engaged. I feel like this would be one. I think I'll have Bill. I think he's the one who invited you to be a guest on our
Yes.
podcast, and I'll ask him to follow up with you to see if he want to pick. I mean, obviously you're out of school now, aren't you? So
No, I'm in school until the 26th, so I have a few more days.
oh yeah, well, I mean,
Mm.
we're not going to
I
get
mean,
anything
out like
organized
objectively,
before
yes.
now, and then they'll have
Yeah.
forgotten everything before we go to September. September is a busy time for us, so it might make sense to schedule it ahead of time.
Yes.
But I was, and I think Claudie, the letter on the back, would you do it during would that be the tactile component of the Mendability Minute, or would you do it afterwards?
I would
Or
do
do
it
it separately
after.
altogether?
Yeah, I think I would do the Mendability Minute, then this activity, and then you have the kids so calm and so willing and ready to learn. So I think
Yes.
that would be a good combo.
Yeah, we call it the Mendability Minute, that transition protocol.
Nice.
And you'll learn all about it. We
Let's
taught
watch
the
it.
Mendability Minute a few times in our previous podcast episodes. So those of you who are listening and intrigued, go and rewind. I can't remember the titles now, so that's not very useful. But maybe if you do a search for like the transcripts, and you can see when we mentioned the Mendability Minute. And but yeah, or if any of you are interested, go on our website, mendability.com, click on the education tab, and you'll go straight to the list of the products. And then there's the paid products, but on the left, there's a free training, and you can click here and schedule one of those free trainings for anybody in your class, in your team.
And I love that you said some of the teachers are using that time to center the children in the mornings, because we were kind of advocating for that at the start of the day. You know, we have our normal morning routines, it's the pledge and the anthem, and they're standing straight and we sing a school song. But I did feel that it would be more beneficial to have an activity more like what Claudie described. Yeah.
Yeah, well, after all of this, the pledge, the singing, the standing, you can settle them back down if
Yes.
it riled
Yes.
them up a little bit. I mean, it's good to get the wiggles out, right? It got them standing and
Definitely.
doing some motor stuff, and it's not usually not a bad idea, but then how do you rebring them back
Yes.
after that? How do you
Yeah.
center them back? And I think the Mendability Minute would be perfect for doing that. We usually use it as a way to help the kids transition from the stress of the transportation experience,
Yes.
and leaving home and not wanting to let
Mhm.
go of mom's hands and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
A way to kind of, oof, okay, I'm fine, I'm
Mhm.
good, I'm in control,
Mhm.
I'm ready. And
Yes.
this is what it takes a minute, maybe two. That's really as that quick.
Great. That's great. That's going to be very well received. Yeah.
I think uh, you you've done so many good things already. I hope that when you bring that to your team, that they'll be interested and intrigued.
Oh, they will. They will. We actually just had a mini planning session about our potential professional development schedule for next year. So we're trying to make it more targeted, all the things we discussed, you know, to really support students in transitioning, to not lose instructional time because kids are still, just not yet settled in. And so an activity like this would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the free training is like it's 15 minutes of explanation of training and 15 minutes of Q&A. Okay, now that you've heard the theory, tell us about one or two kids, tell us about some classrooms and the practical stuff. But we get them to experience the Mendability Minute as much as we can in a virtual training environment.
Mhm.
So it's a very it's a cool because you get to experience that surge of
Yeah.
serotonin and dopamine, and you
Yeah.
come out of training like, this is the best training I've ever had.
Yeah.
And they don't realize it's because we've sort of stimulated their brain.
Of course. Yes.
And when
Awesome.
we can say, see that feeling you've got, this is what we're asking you to give
Mhm.
to your kids as a
Yeah.
gift.
Yes. Love it. Something
Cool.
so cool.
I feel like this is a great place to stop our podcast. We've been going for 45 minutes. I think this is plenty of time for everybody. I want to say see you in 2 weeks, everybody, when we release our next episode. Petal, thank you so much
You're
for being our
welcome. It was
guest today and
my
for your
pleasure.
wisdom. And Claudie, of course, as always. Thanks, Mom.
You're welcome, my boy.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.